Everyone and welcome. Hello and welcome, sorry. My name is Stephanie Redden and I'm the GBA Plus project lead at ARAISA, otherwise known as the Atlantic Region Association of Immigrant Serving Agencies. I would like to take a moment to acknowledge that I am currently in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. I am grateful for the peace and friendship treaties. You are all joining us today from the traditional and unceded territories of the Beothuk, Mi'kmaq, Maliseet, and Pescataway peoples, as well as the homelands of the Innu and the Inuit. We recognize the ancestral and continued ties of Indigenous peoples to the lands and waters in this region, also known as Atlantic Canada. Before we begin, I want to start by reflecting on what reconciliation means beyond land acknowledgements, which, while representative of an important step towards reconciliation, do not go far enough on their own. Certainly, the Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's calls to action 93 and 94 can be seen as important starting points for recognizing this, but it is not enough. Structural and systemic discrimination against Indigenous peoples persists. Indigenous children are grossly overrepresented in the Canadian foster care system. There are at present 32 long-term drinking water advisories in effect within 30 reserves across Canada. And as the National Inquiry into Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women importantly highlighted, Indigenous women are 4 times more likely than non-Indigenous women to be victims of violence. We have much work to do to redress these injustices as we continue to work toward reconciliation. As we invite you to consider intersectionality during today's webinar, it is important to apply this lens to the lived realities of Indigenous people in Canada today. The violence experienced by Indigenous people is experienced in different ways based on intersecting social identities. We must continue to consider the multiple and intersecting forms of discrimination experienced by everyone. The Honorable Justice Senator Murray Sinclair stated that education is the key to reconciliation. Education is what got us here, and education is what will get us out. I take his powerful words as a starting point. Over the past year as an organization, we have collectively read, listened to, watched, and discussed content that explores not just the horrors of the residential school system, but also importantly, how Indigenous people in the Atlantic region and across the country have been working to celebrate and in many cases reclaim their culture, language, and traditions. This experience, this education has allowed me to begin thinking more concretely about what reconciliation means to me personally. I'm committed to finding ways to center Indigenous knowledge and experience and to work toward building meaningful relationships with Indigenous communities in the work that I do. So, just to start, I'll just give a quick, really brief overview of the structure of today's webinar. So first I'll start just giving a quick refresher on what GBA Plus is, and then I'll do a quick overview of the Enhancing National Sector GBA Plus Capacity Project. Then I'll outline the resources that were developed by the national project team. And I'll spend some time talking about the 2 tools that ARAISA contributed to the National Bilingual Resource Guide. The latter part of the webinar will feature a discussion with both of our GBA Plus pilot partners and how they have integrated GBA Plus into their operations through this pilot program. And then, as mentioned, there will be time at the end to have a discussion and answer questions that you might have. So what is Gender-Based Analysis Plus? Some of you may know it's an analytical process for understanding who is impacted by the issue or opportunity being addressed by an initiative, identifying how the initiative could be tailored to meet diverse needs of the people most impacted, and anticipating and mitigating any barriers to accessing or benefiting from the initiative. As part of the 1995 Federal Plan for Gender Equality, the Government of Canada committed to conducting GBA on all future legislation, policies, and programs. In 2011, GBA Plus transformed into GBA was rebranded and transformed into GBA Plus to include multiple factors that shape experiences and outcomes beyond just sex and gender. And that's represented with the intersectionality identity wheels from Women and Gender Equality Canada on the top right. Intersectionality, the term was coined by Kimberly Crenshaw in 1989. And intersectionality is defined as the interconnected nature of social categorization such as race, class, and gender as they apply to a given individual or group, regarded as creating overlapping, which is really important, and interdependent systems of discrimination or disadvantage. The approach plays a key role across all aspects of the Canadian government. A GBA Plus annex is included with all memoranda to Cabinet, Treasury Board submissions, and federal budget and off-cycle proposals. It is also obviously a critical part of IRCC's work. IRCC is actually the only federal department that's required to conduct and report to Parliament on GBA Plus, and this is through the Immigration and Refugee Protection Act that came into force in 2002. GBA Plus offers a way to enhance and expand the equity work that is already underway in the settlement sector. IRCC's most recent CFP, as many of you know, included a GBA Plus component for the first time. And given this, it signals that the usage of this framework within the sector will undoubtedly increase over time. So now to the national project. I say it is because we're on our final month of the project. So in some ways it's still going on, but it will be complete by the end of this month. But it was a 17-month project. It was funded by IRCC and ARAISA in partnership with 6 other settlement sector umbrella organizations nationwide, committed to collaborate on a project that would provide the newcomer serving sector, with skills, tools, and resources to adopt gender equality approaches using a collective impact framework. This just gives a quick overview of the structure of the national team. We had a national project manager based in BC at AMSA, as well as Sarosh Rizvi and Leisha Kanbor at AMSA were part of the national leadership team as well. And we had a logistics coordinator also housed at AMSA. So each of the umbrellas had a project lead. We had a translator, Besma, who was situated in the FCFA, and then there were 3 research leads that were present in 3 of the 6 participating umbrella organizations. There were 2 phases to this project. The first phase was an internal organizational readiness assessment. So all of the project leads at the participating organizations undertook an internal review of their organization's operations to see what gaps and opportunities existed to implement and integrate GBA Plus into their daily operations. And then the second part, which we'll spend I hope most of the time today talking about, was the GBA Plus pilot program. So as part of the national project, each umbrella chose 2 service providing organizations in their region or province to work with to both pilot and test tools that were developed by the national project team, as well as to support them with their own GBA Plus initiatives within their organizations. So for this part of the project, ARAISA partnered with the Association for New Canadians based in Saint John's, Newfoundland, and the Saint John Newcomers Centre based in Saint John, New Brunswick. So for this project, a number of resources have been developed. There were 2 settlement sector focused GBA Plus courses that were produced as part of the project. The first focuses on providing an introduction to gender-based analysis plus, and the second is more focused on building organizational capacity using a GBA Plus lens. These courses are available through the Alberta Association of Immigrant Serving Agencies Learning Management System. I don't think they're open currently at the moment for enrollment, but they will be again in the future. And they may also at some point be hosted and offered by other participating umbrella organizations in the future who have an LMS system set up. And those courses will be available in English and French. There was also an additional course developed and offered through FCFA that is specific to the Francophone context, and it is available in French only. We also have the National Bilingual GBA Plus Resource Guide, which I mentioned earlier. It has over 20 tools and resources that were developed by our team and tested by SPOs across the country to help organizations enhance their capacity to integrate GBA Plus. So I won't go through the full list of resources that are part of the guide, but I'll actually just go to the next slide here. So there's actually, because there are so many resources contained in this, it's been split up in 3 parts. And this is really exciting because this is kind of a sneak peek of the resource guide that's almost complete. And I just got these last night, so it was very exciting to see. So the first kind of package of resources will be focused on foundational GBA Plus knowledge. The second will be implementing GBA Plus through internal GBA Plus, or through exploring internal GBA Plus readiness and capacity. And then the third package will have resources focused on equitable data collection and management. Just going to go back. And those resources will be available through each of the participating umbrella organizations' websites when they're complete. And that includes us at ARAISA. So we will include those resources on our GBA Plus page on our website. And we will also promote them through our newsletter, and we can send them out to those registered today as well once they become available. As I mentioned, ARAISA developed 2 tools as part of the National Bilingual Resource Guide. The first was a board diversity survey and matrix tool, or I should say tools rather. And this is the first part is a survey that's used to gather data on board members' skills, experiences, and social identities. Then that data, once collected, will be used to fill out the second part of the set of tools, which is the diversity matrix itself. And this process can be started at any time and be used to identify representation gaps, allowing your board to strategize ways to address these gaps when seeking new members. So this is kind of a sneak peek of what they look like. There's a part 1 and part 2. So obviously, as I mentioned, part 1 is the survey, and there are instructions on how to complete that, and also kind of prompting you to think forward as an organization about how often you might think about going through this exercise, and then also reflecting on what you will do with the results. And this is a kind of a sneak peek of the second part, which is the actual matrix itself that the data will be plugged into. The other tool that we developed here at ARAISA was a staff readiness and assessment survey. So we initially developed this as a tool for assessing our own internal GBA Plus readiness and capacity. And through the course of developing the national set of tools, I adapted it into a template that organizations beyond just us could use as a starting point for obtaining obtaining a baseline reading, of readiness to integrate or enhance the use of GBA Plus within their work. So for this one, again, similar to the board diversity matrix, it's not really a one and done. It's very much a dynamic tool and resource that should be part of a continual assessment and reassessment of capacity and commitment to GBA Plus. So again, part of that tool as well is deciding on how frequently you will revisit staff capacity and readiness. And this is a sneak peek of what that tool looks like. There are different types of questions. They're primarily multiple choice. There's also a Likert scale that looks at, and kind of part of it is included here, part of it is cut off. Various terms and frameworks related to GBA Plus that your staff is probably already aware of and has some foundation that they can build on in terms of more formally adopting GBA Plus. So things like intersectionality, anti-racism, anti-oppression. So these tools, again, developed by us, they were both piloted by one of SACIA's, which is the Saskatchewan umbrella organization's pilot partners, the Humboldt Regional Newcomers Centre. And their really generous feedback that they provided was used to refine both of those tools. Also, feedback from my colleagues at ARAISA was used and integrated into the final versions. Actually, the board diversity matrix, I started out having it as one singular tool, but it, through trying to apply that and make it work, you realize, I realized you need something in addition to that to gather the data. So that's why we now have a 2-part tool. And I think that just before we move to the final part of the webinar, I think that's a really important point about these resources. Yes, while they were developed by the national project team, they were all tested, reviewed, and refined based on the participation of our pilot partners and the work they did to actually see how they work on the ground. And I know the tools and resources would be nowhere near as phenomenal as they are without that lived experience on the ground, frontline feedback. And also I'll highlight that this group of resources, it really is able to meet any organization where they're at any point on their GBA Plus journey. There are tools in there that will help if you're starting out and you have no experience applying GBA Plus. There are those that are, if you're like midway through your journey, you've applied it, but you need to know more. And then there are tools that can be applied and reapplied as you continue and advance your journey in integrating GBA Plus. So it really is a well-rounded set of tools and resources. So with that said, I'd like to move towards, I think, what is the most exciting part. Well, I'm torn because it is exciting to see the tools and resources come to fruition. But for me, the highlight of the national project really has been getting to work with our two pilot partners, Asta Rowe and Mohammed Bega. And it really was phenomenal to be able to see how GBA Plus was integrated by each of those organizations in very different parts of the work that they do. And I think this is going to be so valuable because we did 2 webinars in the fall on GBA Plus. One kind of coincided with CFP and was more focused on funding applications. But I think one of the number one questions I got then, as well as I've continued to get as I, have attended events and continue to talk about GBA Plus in the region, is what does GBA Plus look like in the settlement sector? And as somebody that was new to the sector coming into this position, it isn't something I was sort of readily equipped to provide examples of, aside from how, IRCC applies it at the federal government level. And so today we have 2 amazing examples of what GBA Plus looks like on the ground in the region. So if you wouldn't mind, I just need to maximize because I can't see anybody anymore. Asta and Mohammed, if you wouldn't mind, just you can unmute now and maybe just say hello. Hi, Mohammed, I see you now. Hi, Lena. Lena's also a phenomenal person, also at the Saint John Newcomers Centre. Okay, so do we have Asta yet? Just double checking. Oh, there we go, Asta. Sorry, I couldn't see you when we started. So I have a set of questions to kind of guide our discussion, but my hope is that it will be conversational and informal and a chance to kind of reflect back on what the pilot project looked like, what your experiences, your insights were from that. But also this isn't structured, so the conversation can go where the conversation wants to go. But just in the interest of getting us started, I'm wondering if, and please either Asta or Mohammed or Lena, feel free to start. If you could describe the project that you undertook as part of the GBA Plus pilot program and, what some of the key outcomes of that work was.
So Stephanie, thank you so much. My name is Mohammed Baga. I'm the managing director here at the Saint John Newcomers Centre, and with me is Lena Garbia at the center, who has been a phenomenal support in ensuring that the work that we do here at the center has been that we were able to take on this particular work and implement it within the timeline. I would also like to acknowledge my leadership team as well, who are key aspects in brainstorming and coming up with different ways of ideas. The way the St. John Newcomers Centre undertook this challenge was to integrate a gender-based analysis project framework into the entire operations of our organization to enhance inclusivity and equity. Now, we all have a DEI policy, or if we don't have one, we are practicing DEI in some form. But what we don't know, what we essentially don't do, generally is account for all the good work that is happening in our work. So what this project did, or what this initiative helped us, is to think through a little more. So we took a comprehensive gap analysis to identify key areas of improvement, such as gender diversity in our leadership at the center, such as the need for formal inclusive policies, as well as including as well as the need for a structured performance evaluation capacity to be built. So sometimes what we do is, yes, we do a performance evaluation, we account for things, but we normally don't really apply the things that we preach. So what we really wanted to do is not only apply them, but also account for them. So we involved a project consultant based out of Atlanta, who helped with consultations with staff, survey our employees, and develop a literature review of our current and existing policies, and then how they felt within the GBA Plus framework. What they found out was that that the SGNC was actually doing a lot of GBA Plus work, but what was necessary was to do it in such a way that it is targeted right from the recruitment all the way to the exit strategy for this particular work. So I would say, for example, some of the actionable recommendations that the consultant provided to us was to have targeted recruitment to balance gender representation on our team, mandatory inclusive training at every stage of employment, to collect data for DEI tracking, so diversity, equity, and inclusion tracking, as well as create clear pathways, career pathways for employees, that they are able to apply DEI and gender-based analysis plus structures in the work that they do. Now, this initiative has aimed to create a more inclusive workplace for ourselves, but also align our operations with our community diversity needs, as well as position the Saint John Newcomers Centre as a leader in newcomer support and equity. Key outcomes that came out of this included identification of specific areas for improvement, such as the need, talked about gender balance in our leadership, but in our entire team as well, a more comprehensive inclusive policy, as well as an enhanced performance evaluation system. We were very fortunate to have this, to develop this, and there are so many templates that are developed as a result of this, that we will be now working with our board of directors to see how we can implement in our every aspect of our organizational operations strategically, that we can then account for where we are and create a baseline for GBA Plus. But before I go any further, Lena is with me on the line there as well. So if Lena wants to say add to the word, I'd really appreciate that.
Yes, please. Thank you. And welcome, Lena.
I think I said it all, but
thank you so much, Mohammed. Thank you, Stephanie. Mohammed definitely said it all. We're really appreciative about the opportunity to be part of this amazing project. And Stephanie, you were a huge supporter. You were with us from step one, and it was really, really great working with you. You made it more like smoother to gather the information and ask questions and all that. We really appreciate it. And as Mohammed said, and I think this is the scenario with almost all of us, we apply the GBA Plus in our work, HR, program delivery, you name it. It just, we're not highlighting it enough. We're not identifying it. We need to do that, because that way we can do better. Because there's always, definitely there is room for improvement, like Mohammed mentioned in the report as well. So we are on the right track, and just being here today at this webinar shows and proves that we're all on the same page and we're all looking for the same results. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Lena. And all of that right back to you and Mohammed and Asta as well. It's been such a pleasure to be part of this pilot project journey. And I appreciate you both sharing your the work that you did during that time. Asta, would you like to speak a little bit about your experiences with the pilot program at the Association for New Canadians?
Hi everyone, Mohammed and Lena and Stephanie. It's like we've become a little family, you know, collaborating, learning about each other's projects, and so much to echo in what they've said, what they've brought up so far. You know, a huge shout out to Stephanie and ARAISA, who've given us this opportunity. ANC had never really launched, had never really implemented any GBA work within the organization. And as Stephanie has mentioned, it has kind of become a requirement in IRCC, CFPs, and just funding even at the provincial level. So we're really seeing a kind of that GBA Plus is really gaining momentum. So this was a huge opportunity for us, and we're in Atlantic Canada, so there's that kind of that solidarity, I would say, which is geographically based. I also wanted to say that, yeah, so really interestingly, if when this is a bit of a side note, but when Mohammed was mentioning that that GBA Plus produced kind of data on the fact that there was an imbalance in leadership roles, you really wouldn't expect it, but the fact is that skewed more in favor of women, and that there was an imbalance of male representation. And so this is what a GBA Plus can do. It sort of foregrounds very unexpected results, and it's only through doing a GBA Plus that you'll be able to glean these results, this data, etc. So in terms of what we did at the ANC, it was diametrically opposite to Mohammed's and Lena's approach, which is so interesting because we're all three presenting at a conference in Vancouver, Pathways to Prosperity. In fact, Stephanie, Mohammed, me, and SRDC, who are a social impact sort of a research organization based out of Ottawa, but I think they have offices all over. We're all going to be on the same panel talking about GBA Plus and about what we're some of what we're discussing here. And so it was so interesting when Mohammed and I were preparing for our presentations. It's like, oh, so Mohammed, SJNC took this kind of whole of organization approach, auditing their whole organization in terms of, okay, where are those needs, where are those GBA plus pressure points, that we need to kind of investigate and where we can implement GBA plus. Whereas for us at the ANC, we just like we chose the most peripheral project possible, which was this kind of at the interface of volunteerism and newcomer client activity programming. So this was a decision by senior leadership, and it's interesting because it's like, okay, so if it can work, if the application of this pilot can work at the extreme confines of our organization, can it filter upward? Can it kind of filter up and influence and take root within the organization as a whole? And just before I begin talking about our outcomes, etc., I did want to mention that like Mohammed, we also yep, and I've lost my thoughts. So we're gonna just move on to what I was gonna say, and maybe that thought will come back again. So yeah, the thought that here's the thing. It's so interesting because when you're working in settlement, you really are you are practicing GBA plus, you are practicing EDI, you are practicing um, these social identity frameworks. You're doing it without really a formal structure. So this is what this pilot enables us to do, is to sort of formalize our understanding of these overarching methodologies and practices, and also refine our work, So, but it's not that we're not doing it. So that's a very interesting insight. And I think it could be said of any or most newcomers serving agencies. So let's see. The key outcomes, right? So what we did was we created a group of 7 a focus group. It was called the Volunteer Focus Group, composed of 7 ANC volunteers, mostly international students, young, bright, newcomers, and who had some experience working with ANC's volunteer program. And we're like, okay, so let's do a GBA plus of the Community Connections volunteer program. So we all, all together and at the same time did the Women and Gender Equality GBA plus certification. We then started asking ourselves key, questions, following the protocols really, but doing it in a very kind of informal manner, informal yet rigorous at the same time. So there's that interesting balance. And we then, so we really applied GBA plus to the entire volunteer management cycle of community connections, looking at, okay, so what are the barriers to becoming a volunteer at the ANC? What mechanisms have been put in place to, if volunteers are facing any forms of discrimination, are the communications, inclusive of all identity factors, and it was really a task, just sort of sitting down with this huge looming methodology and trying to apply it. But I mean, we really obtained amazing results, so one of which is that Community Connections now has an entire GBA plus recommendations report, that they can now use, that they can draw from in order to implement changes. And we also in parallel wanted to test whether the end users, meaning so this was a smaller part of the pilot, but we wanted to include the clients who are actually using those programs. We wanted to extend this to them too. So we developed a video, what we called a kind of GBA plus package. So there was a video which was a sort of a small tutorial on what is GBA plus, especially as it pertains to newcomers. And then we developed a survey and a brochure. So now we're going to try and use those tools in order to explain to clients, this is why we need your feedback. This is, we can't just make the assumption that everyone is going to feel okay providing feedback, especially when you come from political regimes where such things are kind of very vexed and difficult to provide information. So we needed to, it was a kind of a more trauma-informed approach to that. And then another outcome is we sort of then branched out a tiny bit, a kind of a spin-off, newcomer volunteer summit, really looking at what is the state of affairs of newcomer volunteerism in this province. And that was very, very interesting. And we partnered with Volunteer Canada and community sector NL. And yeah, so like in terms of also achievements or what have you, But I think that might be a subsequent question, so I'll just stop at that.
Thank you so much, Asta. I really appreciate you walking us through what that project, the pilot program project cycle looked like. I really, in both cases for the ANC and SJNC, was blown away by kind of the scope of work that you did as part of this pilot program. And, you know, Asta, you mentioned that, well, you mentioned Mohammed did kind of an organization, as a whole organization approach, and you focus on one very narrow part of ANC's programming. But in doing that and focusing on that very small part, you did an expansive amount of work in terms of digging in and actually, like you correct me if I'm if I'm misremembering, but you and the volunteer focus group went through all the recruitment materials, all of the kind of outward facing things related to the program, and made sure that that GBA Plus lens was applied to everything. And I think that also comes out in that recommendations report, which is so phenomenal that you're able to have that, produce that end product that then leadership can take and you know, try to address the points that you've the kind of points that you and the VFG highlighted through that process. So yeah, this, like I said, this is a career highlight for me, because honestly, you know, I have some background in doing GBA Plus in the federal government, but seeing GBA Plus like actually on the ground being applied, especially in this kind of service and program provision setting with newcomers, has just been like, it has blown my mind. With that said, I'm wondering if there are some best practices that maybe you can recommend for others in attendance that are maybe on different parts of their GBA Plus journey, that information that you think might be helpful for them as they start or continue along their journey to implement GBA Plus.
I don't know, Stephanie, if I can jump in here, but I think from the little I have known or spoken to Asta about, all what I know is, you know, they've done phenomenal work that is not only useful to the ANC but probably to the entire sector. I was blown away at the meeting in Saskatchewan when I saw the video. I think what it really did, it put the Atlantic provinces right on the top of the mountain in that meeting to ensure that the work we were doing was nationally recognizable. And not only nationally recognizable, but probably putting a spin onto it that it was very usable. It wasn't done in a form of some organizational lens. So I was very, very, very pleased. In fact, when I came back, I spoke to my entire team. I said, every volunteer in my at the SGNC should be watching that video once it's released, because it kind of really resonates, regardless whether you are an organization that has got hundreds of employees or you are an organization that has a dozen volunteers. It doesn't really matter, because that work was so powerful. So, you know, heads off to the ANC, heads off to Asta, heads off to her team. I think it really kind of, from a deliverable perspective. The other thing as well, what I saw in the work that we are doing is we are cornering the stone here. We are unturning the stone in a way that we have not unturned it in many aspects. We are able to do this because we are small as a region. We are cohesive as a region. We can speak to each other as a region. We are small enough to shift the ship faster. I'm using maritime language here, or Atlantic language. We are able to shift the ship, the angle of the ship, faster than many of those large organizations where they need tons of resources to do that. So it only makes sense that if there's any one organization out here joining the webinar today, you know, to reach out to see what the tools are, not only the national tools, but the tools that were developed by at the organizational levels to see how we can create this. So, for example, there's the video at ANC, and there is policy development work. So, what are some of the EDI policies? I'm sure many of you have one. To have a critical eye, to have a critical link, whether GBA is mentioned, like GBA Plus is mentioned, like one of the things is it was documented by IRCC, as you mentioned, back in 2002. It's legislated big, and we are in what, 2024? We wrote the proposals in 2023. 21 years later is when IRCC decided to put it in the CFP. What about those 21 years? Where was it lost? So I think people are not even aware of the existence of GBA Plus, and the way, and I'll go back one step backward and look at it from a GBA perspective only, without the plus. And what was the dimensions? There were 2 dimensions. All of a sudden, there were 18 dimensions or 16 dimensions, 14 additional dimensions that were added to the plus. The plus meant 14 other dimensions that were added to the thing. So my question, and probably if you are in the chat, if you're the audience, I'd really love to hear from you. Is it the right terminology to begin with? Or should there be another term that is much more resonating with us? So I think those are the type of questions that we need to start asking, because when we are writing our proposals back in 3 or 5 years, or 3, 5, 7 years from now, and putting in a request of to IRCC or any other funder, how do we coin this? Like, we know it, IRCC knows it. Well, what about all the other stakeholders who we are working with? Do they know it? When talk about GBA Plus, what do they think? Do they think about GBA, or do they think about all the other 14 dimensions in there as well? So that's a challenge. That's a challenge to all the webinar participants today. We'd love to see the chat full of ideas. I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I'll just quickly interject there before I hand it off. I'll ask Lena and then Asta if they want to add anything for the best practices. Yeah, and we're just to let you know, Mohammed mentioned the video tutorial that the Asta and the VFG produced. It is a really amazing resource. It's yeah, I can't say enough good things about it. And I know Asta and her team are in the process of kind of nationalizing that resource, and it will be included in that final resource guide. So it will be available for folks. And we'll have it up on our website. Like I mentioned earlier, we have a GBA Plus page that's in the works where we've started to add to it, but it'll progress as we get more of these resources completed. And similar, we're going to have a section on that page that highlights the work that both I should say, as a whole, SJNC did and ANC did. So those resources that Mohammed spoke to, that Asta spoke to, we'll do our best to also have those available there, because I think you're right, Mohammed. There were the resources that came out of the national project, and they are important, and they're going to be I feel very useful for people as they try to implement this in their organizations moving forward. But there were also all these amazing lessons and resources and tools that came out of things at the more local SPO level that I think many other people are going to benefit from as well if they're made available. So yes, thank you. I just did want to say, if anyone in the audience was wondering like where they can get those, we'll be promoting those as they become available, and they'll definitely be up on our site. And the other umbrella, maybe not the Atlantic tools, but it would be nice if they were. But the tools and information that was developed through the other pilot programs in other provinces, they will also, I'm sure, highlight those resources as well. So yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt the flow. I just wanted to make sure everyone knew we're working on it, and we'll get those out so people can take advantage of them. Lena, I was wondering, before I pass it over to Asta with best practices, do you have anything you'd like to add from the SJNC perspective?
Thank you, Stephanie. I just like to add, I know we're all doing this, but just ensuring that the GBA Plus considerations are always incorporated like into the aspects of program and policy development. And to make sure also there is GBA Plus awareness sessions that has, culturally component and tailored for the settlement sectors. It really helps also the staff understand how to apply the GBA principles and collaboration with other organizations is in the sector to share knowledge, resources, like this project already is doing, just to keep doing this and more and be just more creative would definitely help us all. And thank you again to you and ARAISA for this opportunity.
Thank you so much, Lena. Okay, Asta, no pressure, but if you had anything you wanted to add related to best practices, please feel free to add.
Yeah, and you can hear me, right? You can hear me okay. Yeah, honestly, again, starting off from where we began, we were, we're extremely privileged to have done this pilot because frankly, you need funding. I think, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, or you need the capacity, you need, I suppose at a later point when GBA Plus is sort of well anchored in different sections of an organization within its operations, within its service delivery, admin, etc., then maybe things flow a bit easier. But from the outset, I do think that one needs funding. And Stephanie always reminded me, the GBA Plus work takes work. It really does, right? Like, and so we were able to carve out this, what was it, an 8-month period, Stephanie, to really focus on this pilot, to really analyze, to learn, first of all, what GBA Plus is. And on that note, I think one has to sort of fall in love with GBA Plus. I really think that was part of my journey. That was part of the journey. It's such a stimulating, it's a sort of methodology. It's so inclusive. It's terribly collaborative. Did I mention experimental? So it's a kind of open-ended methodology, and you're not going to forecast results. It's kind of it's kind of a treasure hunt. You don't know, like you'll apply the principles, which you need to do, but you don't know what's going to come out at the other end. And it's just so fascinating and beautiful in that respect. I forget where, Stephanie, at our summit when I was talking about GBA Plus, I likened it to UX design. I think it kind of draws on some sort of tech principles of, okay, let's really get the end user involved. How are they experiencing the program? How are they experiencing the services that are being delivered to them? And we are working more towards collaborative frameworks and paradigms, right? Where we really want to work together, because otherwise we're leaving out the very people who are benefiting or supposed to benefit from the programs, the projects, the policies, etc. So understand that it's open-ended, understand that there's a huge co-design element, a huge collaborative element as well. And that, in terms of these 14 plus dimensions or what have you, look, that is what GBA Plus is. It's intersectional. It's looking at, where do identities cross over? Where do they mesh, and what falls through the cracks, essentially, so that it can get very granular once you start applying GBA Plus and looking at data. You're like, wow. So even within, I forget that example, Stephanie, but even within a newcomer, say, household, they saw, after the application of GBA Plus, they saw some inequalities between maybe a woman who was a high earner as compared to her husband, and who's therefore facing certain forms of discrimination or oppression or what have you. So, it's a dynamic system, and it's going to pull multiple perspectives, and really that group of folks who are working to do a GBA plus, to do a gender-based analysis plus, they're all, how they see the world is going to influence the shape of the questions they ask, for instance. And an example, in our group, we had a master's student who had worked in occupational health and safety. So she was very concerned about, okay, our volunteers, how are they protected when they go out, and work with newcomers, right? Questions like this. So it's your lens that's going to create a mosaic within this framework. Other best practices are probably around, would it be possible for a SPO to hire a GBA plus consultant, a bit like what Mohammed did? I mean, we had the benefit of working with an expert like Stephanie. So, even though she wasn't like overshadowing our work, but I could ask her questions, and so you don't need to hire a full-time consultant, but someone who does have knowledge of this and open-mindedness, and who can come in there and say, okay, well, this is maybe think of it this way, right? And look at all those resources. I would say start with that wage course, that wage certification. It's not the be all and end all, but it's an excellent starting point. And then just look at the resources that we've developed, that they've gathered through the national pilot, and that's what I recommend.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing, Asta. Well, and both Mohammed and Lena as well. But I was thinking, as you were both, well, both are both. I was going to say both, but all three of you were speaking from both organizations. I don't know if it's so much of a best practice, but it was something that kind of was illuminated for me, kind of watching this unfold in both cases, was that you can start really small. You can take one program, one point of contact for newcomers, and you can do a really deep dive and start there and extrapolate and move outwards into your organization after you kind of get through that GBA plus of that initial program or service. Or you can start big and start coming down and like figuring out in those smaller places what you can do, like Mohammed, where you have all these recommendations, and then for each of those areas, kind of like deep diving into those to figure out, what's the best next step. So I think that's a really good thing to kind of highlight for folks, right? Like, because I think if you're not doing GBA plus, or you're not familiar with it, and Mohammed, and I think we've all talked about this at some point or another, we're all doing elements of GBA plus. It isn't, new for the sector. But if you're new to this formal kind of approach and framework, not to be intimidated. Like, start how you're going to start. I think wage at some place somewhere, they've said, there's no wrong time to start GBA plus. Like, ideally, you start it at the very beginning of any process you have, and you see it through to the end, to the evaluation phase. But there's no wrong place to start. There's no wrong way to start. And I think both, I love these both kind of like case studies of different types of approaches to take to doing GBA plus, and it shows like all the amazing results that come out of this. It doesn't matter where you start, doesn't matter how you start. You just need to start. And so I really appreciate you guys sharing your experiences in those ways. Just looking at the time. I think most that know me, I know I can talk, keep talking, and I need to be stopped. Or I can keep conversation. I always want to keep conversations going. But maybe we'll do like maybe one final question to all of you. I'm kind of torn between kind of talking about challenges or key takeaways. So maybe I'll throw that out there. You can do either or both, were there roadblocks that you found in your way as you started this process? And how did you overcome them? And, anything else you want to add, just generally? I'll just throw that out there as a general kind of last point. You can speak to those points or, whatever you feel like you'd like to add to conclude for today.
First, thank you, Stephanie. I really, if I may go first, if that's okay, with Asta and Lena. Thumbs up. Okay, perfect. So I say first, I'd like to take a moment, really, to thank Stephanie for your leadership here, and ARAISA's leadership, and AMSA's leadership as well, to recognize that this work is very important. Absolutely, there are lots of challenges, but all challenges are meant to be overcome, in my opinion. If you don't have a challenge, you don't grow. You cannot solve an issue that you don't know exists. So one of the major challenges is I don't know if I can do a quick poll here, and with all the wonderful participants we have, how many of you feel underwhelmed in the sector? If you feel underwhelmed, then do not put anything. But if you do feel overwhelmed, raise your hand, put your hand up, do whatever you want to say. I think we are really challenged with the amount of work that has been has come onto our way without the capacity that has been built and the resources to do the work. So everybody has got a lot of work on their hand, and all of a sudden, we are competing. We have priorities. And sometimes what happens is GBA Plus is a priority, but it sits on the side of my desk or sits on the side of somebody's desk. We do not get the resources to implement and to associate GBA Plus as a core, as a core tool or as a core measurement approach within the work that we do. So I don't think, as far as I'm aware, that there is no organization in the country that is getting funded for a GBA Plus coordinator or a GBA Plus person or a GBA Plus part-time person who's just responsible for implementing GBA Plus organization-wide. This is the first time, that's why I said, hats off to Stephanie and hats off to ARAISA and hats off to AMSA, because they brought this as a key point where for the first time ever, we have a working group that is actually gotten together, pan-Canadian, from coast to coast to coast, looking at it and saying, there is a gap here. Let's try and identify how we can fill it in. So limited capacity and competing priorities have always been a challenge. In fact, these are not my words, these are Lena's words. We are so fortunate to have gone through this exercise to create capacity, to develop an engagement plan. At least we know now that this is the case. The other thing is the lack of understanding of intersectional GBA Plus. So what does that mean? This word intersectionality and GBA Plus are being thrown around in every conference you go to, in every aspect of our work we go to. But do we really understand what it means? Do we have a deep understanding of how we implement it? Again, not my words, Lena's words. Providing a solution through training, creating the resources that we need. That's the solution. The other thing as well is, prior to this project, there were no tools out there for GBA Plus for the sector. So what this project has done is, this is a thing like, yeah, I want to do something GBA Plus. Okay, what do? I go to the federal government. Federal government has got fantastic tools, great tools, but are they applicable always in the sector? That's the question that we need to ask ourselves. And again, not my words, Lena's words. And I'm going to say that all the time because she's the one who helped guide me through this process, is to customize tools and resources specific to organizational work, organization needs, and our sector as a whole. So now we have the sectorial approach. Now, what this would do is this would really put us into a place where we need to create guidelines, checklists, analytical frameworks, and all of that is going to be available not only for us, but any organization out there doing this work. So that Stephanie will share with Stephanie so it is available at not only at the Atlantic level, but at the national level as well. And lastly, I would end off with the impact. Like how do we even talk about impact? Like we do a lot of work, but we don't have a measurement framework to see how GBA Plus is impacting our work. How are we monitoring our GBA Plus? So there's a big lack. There's a big challenge for an organization. How do we create a monitoring and evaluation framework to track the effectiveness of our effort? Again, not my words, Lena's words. This could help us develop specific indicators to measure and regularly collect and analyze data on GBA Plus outcomes. So you know what? Now imagine this is a lived experience. This is a lived experience for all of us, day in, day out. I started with I didn't see anybody who's underwhelmed here. Everybody seems to be overwhelmed. Nobody raised their hand. So I'd say, like, once you're overwhelmed and then another thing comes onto you, and then I talked about 5 things. Imagine, is it fair? So I know I'm not allowed to advocate, or use the word advocate, but I think we as a sector need to think through how we can develop resources that can help us overcome barriers and challenges. If we don't have those barriers and challenges, okay, guess what? It will also help, the implications of our work will help the wider society, not only the sector.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mohammed. I'll just add a couple of points before maybe I can hand it over to Lena. Mohammed's highlighted so many wonderful points that you brought up throughout the project. Yeah, just to highlight, also to shout out the Alberta Association of Immigrant Serving Agencies, who sort of co-led the project with AMSA. Well, we all sort of we collaborated on all the umbrellas, but ASA and AMSA and that kind of leadership part. And then also to echo what Mohammed said, and I think Lena and Asta, you've kind of touched on this as well, like what a surreal experience this kind of project is, to be able to take, in our case with the national project, 17 months to do nothing but equity focused work. And then for the pilot partners, people, folks that are on the ground doing service and program provision on a daily basis, to have that space to be able to dig into whether it's one part of your programming or services or an organizational kind of a broad approach. It's like, I'm not unaware of the kind of privileged space that was to be able to do that with the funding that was available. But with that said, I think Mohammed makes a great point, and like you don't necessarily need to hire like an outside consultant or expert. It's about finding that expertise within our sector that already exists and drawing on it and collaborating and supporting each other. That said, I mean, funding, capacity, these are all realistic concerns, right? I don't want to diminish that for sure. Asta, you highlighted, like, and we've talked about GBA Plus is work. It is added work. It is, to do it properly, it means really taking the time to sit down and do that deep analytical work. The end result is worth it, but it is important to acknowledge that there are barriers. I think both of your cases provide really wonderful ways of how those were overcome. But yeah, I'll leave it there because I tend to ramble. But Lena, is there anything else that you wanted to add on to what Mohammed said in terms of the SJNC experience?
What else can I add? He definitely said it all. Of course, every single point, I definitely agree, and that is these are exactly what what we have experienced, and even with recommendations and all that. Really, for the SJNC, just again, we're lucky to be part of that program, a project, because like Mohammed said, and you're saying as well, Stephanie, topic like this, it needs someone who's like a full-time kind of person. So funding is an issue. This is the reality we live in, but that does not mean we shouldn't be doing it, or even or ignore it, or just do it halfway. We really have like the awareness for the staff. We go over these kind of points and training for our staff, HR, all the time. It's really important to identify these factors among our clients and even staff, because this is how you're going to be able to deliver the service in the best way possible. We really need like more robust and inclusive, decision-making processes, and we need policymakers to be involved, and we have to keep talking about it. But we're definitely start applying it in a different way, as I mentioned earlier, and Mohammed and Asta and yourself were all applying it, but we need to have it in more structured, and it has to be more focused under a microscope kind of thing when we do the planning and program delivery. And the staff as well, HR is very important, very, very important, because they're the people who, they're gonna deliver the service at the end. So raising awareness among staff is definitely a key.
Thank you so much, Lena. Yeah, I'll pass it on to, I have so many things I want to say, but in the interest of time, I'll just, I want to hand it over to Asta. I want to make sure that we have time after our discussion for people to ask questions. I know I've seen some pop up. I'm seeing the questions pop up, and we'll definitely get to as many of those as possible. But and that's not to rush you, Asta, but any sort of last thoughts or things that you wanted to add on to what Mohammed and Lena have said?
Right. So, I mean, yeah, again, we could talk about this for hours. Literally, there's so many ideas kind of bouncing around, and things that, I want to pick up and pick up on and discuss. So, for example, one of the things that Mohammed mentioned was, when what are these terms? What is intersectionality? What is GBA plus? And what I can say is that, it's really through GBA plus, you have the sort of the theory, which is extremely important, but GBA plus comes to life, through that application, and you learn about GBA plus by applying it. Is what our experience was, and honestly, like we were babes in the wood. We even me, like I had to keep, I don't know how many months, in, and I was still looking up that definition. So that's very normal. That's very normal because it's a complex methodology. Don't I want to disabuse you like of the fact that I would say something like ETI is a bit simpler in a sense, but GBA plus isn't. It's not. It's a complex methodology, and so you need to keep coming back to those definitions, to that understanding, but then you need to apply them, and that's how you learn about GBA plus. There's a kind of autodidactic element to it. And then, you know, for organizations that, you know, want to do GBA Plus, EDI, ARAO, you know, all these different, you know, terms that are being thrown around. Frankly, like GBA Plus encompasses those other protocols, those other, you know, practices. So by doing GBA Plus, you're by default doing EDI work. You're by default doing anti-oppression, anti-racism work, right? Those are a couple of points in terms of our roadblocks or challenges. They weren't huge ones. Listen, that feeling of being overwhelmed is real. It is real. Like it is an overwhelming methodology. You know, I said the wage certification kind of you know, summarizes it, parses it down a bit, but it is an overwhelming sort of to get into it, but you've got to start. That's the thing is you know, that Lao Tzu saying of, you know, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with the first step. You've just got to take that first step. For us, it was our challenge was, even though we were so grateful that we were able to give honoraria to our volunteer focus groups, that the numbers just dwindle from say 15 to 7, and I was like, oh no, what is this gonna is this gonna constitute a focus group? Can we legitimately, you know, run a focus group with so few numbers? And Simone Chia, you know, so reassuring in that, that's going to work. And it did. It actually did, you see. So it could have been even 3 people and we'd have gotten the work done. You know, again, I can't overemphasize this point about funding. I mean, I'm wondering whether do we need a GBA Plus Tiger Team, Atlantic Canada Tiger Team, to go and help different organizations and to go in there and get things moving, because what's the point of having done this work? Even to be very honest, and this kind of grieves me a tiny bit, are those recommendations that we generated, are they going to actually be you know, applied? Are we going to give the end users of these programs or these activities the surveys? You know, what's going to happen, you know, after that? So right now, you know, but I can say that because of the success of this pilot, where ANC is more committed than ever to enhance its GBA Plus capacity, and you know, we've applied for provincial funding to integrate GBA Plus across the organization. Essentially, what we want to do is create these divisional GBA roadmaps, because again, you cannot, with GBA Plus, what's going to work for employment services is not going to work for language services, is not going to work for Ukraine services, etc. Right? So, and yeah, so we're more confident thanks to this pilot in applying this methodology and recognizing its value. At least those who, you know, were direct, who provided oversight, etc. And again, just I'll end off by you know, saying that we're extremely grateful and pleased at the outcomes, and we want to formally thank the National GBA Plus project team, ARAISA, Stephanie, Carolyn, Simone, everyone, for this tremendous opportunity.
Thank you so much, Asta. I mean, again, as I said earlier, all of that and more back to all 3 of you and your colleagues and your organizations that really dug in and did the hard work of starting and continuing on after that to push GBA Plus, you know, beyond that pilot phase. I had a point I want to say. I kind of lost my train of thought as well. Oh, the learning by doing. Yeah, I mean, I wasn't directly involved in the day-to-day and the work that you did with the VFG, Asta, or the work, Mohammed and Lena, that you did with your consultant. But I learned so much about GBA Plus and its potential through seeing how those processes unfolded. So I also was very much a learner on this journey as well. And so, yeah, I think you, like you pointed out, Asta, the more you do, the more you learn. and, you know, the different contexts you do it in, you're going to learn different things. And I liked that you highlighted that. It's like, you don't know what's going to come out of it. And that's kind of the exciting, maybe partially intimidating part of it, but like, you know, that's why we need to do it. And, you know, like the gender imbalance in leadership, you just don't know what you're going to find. I think, Mohammed, you said we got to start unturning these stones. We haven't been unturning. And I think that like all the language and all the examples and all these things that you've provided through participating in the discussion today has just been phenomenal. And again, I'll just reiterate, I feel like this has been a bit of a love fest today because we've all been on this journey at the national level for 17 months, ending this month. And then the pilot partners, yeah, Asti, you said, I was like, I don't even know how many months. It was like at least 6 months that we worked together on that pilot program. And it's just been like, you know, this will stay with me. This will stay with me as I move forward. And I hope I do equity work. And if you would like to form the superpower team in the Atlantic region to GBA Plus, I would like to put my application in. I am very interested in that. It sounds amazing. I kid, but what a dream that would be. So I'm going to end it there. Again, I have a propensity to ramble, but we've got about 12 minutes left, I think. And so I really want to leave some space for questions. And I know my colleagues have also been monitoring the chat. I haven't been able to, but I know that I could see some questions were coming in. So I would remind you, if you want to ask a question, use the raised hand function or icon, and then hopefully I'm also not the most technologically savvy person, but hopefully I'll be able to see you here. And Olivia and I believe Victoria, or not Victoria, Olivia and Yasmin are have their eyes on the chat as well. Okay. Any questions for Mohammed, Lena, Asta, or myself? Olivia, were there any in the chat? I thought I could see some coming in as we were talking.
We had a few comments. There was a link shared to the wage course as well.
Oh, okay, great.
And the resources that you mentioned are going to be available on the ARAISA website in the next couple of weeks. That was asked and answered.
Okay. Okay, awesome. Sorry, I'm just trying to make this so I'm not blacking you out, Lena, with the list of participants so I can see people, but I also want to see you, Lena. Yeah, so the resources, that's awesome. Yes, the wage course is always a great starting point. The 2 courses that came out of this one, as you're able to access them, are really going to be great resources as well. Like Mohammed said, there was definitely a lack of sector-specific guidance around GBA Plus at a time when it was becoming an increasingly large part of the work that we're going to be doing in the sector. So yeah, it's really exciting to be part of that process that produced. Will we be notified? Yes. So at least at our organization's level, we will certainly promote that material through our newsletter. And we're going to, it will live on our GBA Plus webpage, and the National Bilingual Resource Guide will live on each of the umbrellas websites across the country that participated. Oh, yes, oh, yeah, sorry. Thank you, Carolyn. I'm sorry. I don't think it was a question, but yeah, so the project will end this month, but I'm happy that I'll be still staying on at ARAISA at least until the end of March of next year. So I am available if you have questions. I can put my email address out there as well. And if they're comfortable, Lena, Mohammed, and Asta, maybe we can share your contact information if folks are kind of on that journey and want to touch base with you to see if maybe some of the issues that are coming up from them overlap with what you experienced. Was going to say, oh yes, there's also a national research report. So the 3 research leads, they were housed at OCASI in Ontario, Manso in Manitoba, sorry, and at ARAISA in Alberta. They talked to SPOs across the country. We were fortunate, the OCASI research lead came here and interviewed one of our service providing organizations in the region. And so all of that material is being compiled and will be consolidated into a research report looking at GBA Plus capacity across the country, which is really exciting. And so it isn't available yet. We're hoping, I think we're looking at the new year, sometime in the new year, to have that available. And like all the others, we'll definitely let you know. And I know we'll put them in our newsletter. And I'm not sure if all of you are subscribed. If you're not, you can go to our website and sign up. It's a great place to find information, not just about GBA Plus and what we're doing here, but about the sector in general. Sorry, that felt like a weird plug, but but if you want to make sure you get that, you can sign up for the newsletter and check back on our website, our webpage. Oh, yes, Melanie, thank you. Yes, we'll be able to share them. And actually, after today, I think maybe in the next couple days, we're going to send out an evaluation form for the evaluation for you. If you would, I would be grateful if you completed it about the webinar today. And the two resources that ARAISA produced, the board diversity survey and matrix tools, as well as the staff capacity survey, will be included in that email. And they are already available in English and French, so you'll get those. And then, but we'll definitely, I think I'm going to make a note so that everybody get registered today. As these resources start being finalized and completed, the national level resources, the guide, the report, more information on the courses, we'll make sure to pass it on to everybody that was that registered today, so you don't miss it. Yeah, are there any other questions that I have missed? I think I was seeing things as they came in now. I don't want to miss anybody. Okay. I always feel bad because it always takes me a minute to formulate questions, so I don't like to rush people. Yeah, I don't see any more. Olivia, there aren't any more in the chat, are there?
No.
Okay. Well, if there aren't any more questions today, I think we can wrap up ever so slightly early. I always love, it's overused, but I love saying I can give you back 6 minutes. It'll probably be 5 by the time I end talking, but you get the point. So I really want to thank again everybody for attending today. It's very appreciated. Your interest in this is very appreciated, and your commitment to equity work is very much appreciated. And I definitely want to thank Mohammed, Lena, and Asta for taking the time to show up today and share their experiences in depth. And just for the pilot project partnership work in general, it's been, like I said, a career highlight and a huge honor to get to work with you. And I hope as I stay on into the new year, our paths will continue to cross. And I also want to thank my colleagues at ARAISA. I know I kind of shouted out Olivia and Yasmin, but we've also got Florence and Melanie, and I feel like I'm forgetting somebody. I know Victoria, sorry, in the background doing tech support, monitoring the chat. They really were a great support system today. And thank Hussam, our interpreter. I joked with Hussam before we started. I'm both an Atlantic Canadian and a nervous fast talker, so I said he had his work cut out for him today. Hopefully it wasn't too painful. But I hope today, has energized people a little around this, and maybe provided some entry points if you're looking to get started on how you can, and you'd be hopefully leave ever so slightly better equipped to integrate GBA Plus into your work. Okay, well, thank you so much, everyone. Bye, and I hope you have a great rest of the day, and thanks, everybody.